this the ultimate bioharmonic technology? Is it possible that small, wearable patches can unlock your body's natural ability to heal, protect, and rejuvenate? Phototherapy patches are redefining health optimization and biohacking by harnessing your body's own biophoton emissions. And the kicker, there's not actually any active substance on these patches. Yet, there are a number of studies that show that these patches still elevate certain molecules to the same levels as the substances themselves, including injectable peptides like GHK-Cu, copper peptide. In this episode, we uncover why these patches are some of the most exciting technological breakthroughs. I have several of them in front of me, one called Olavita, another called X39, and a third called Energy Enhancer. You'll hear all about how they work in this episode. This is one of those things that I'm highly skeptical of until I hear a bunch of anecdotes from real-world users who have no affiliation with the company, no investment in the company, have nothing to gain from sharing their experiences. And as you'd expect, since it's a private company funding a lot of the research, they're not the biggest clinical trials. They don't have the most number of participants. They do find positive results most of the time. But what I find especially interesting about these products is that you don't actually have to consume any substance, which first of all, they can be hard to source sometimes with peptides. They can be of questionable purity. And a lot of peptides have issues with lipopolysaccharide contamination. And if you're injecting lipopolysaccharide, that is a recipe for disaster. And the biggest one for me is that in addition to the convenience and the portability and everything, you can travel with these, so it's not an issue in customs. The half-life of them is much, much longer. For example, copper peptide only lasts about 1 hour, but the copper peptide patch lasts 12 hours. So this is one of those technologies that I foresee putting therapeutic peptides into the mainstream realm. As you'd expect, in this episode, we discuss copper peptides, GHK-Cu, and AHK-Cu in the X39 and X49 LifeWave patches. We discuss stem cell activation. Hint, if you haven't heard the podcast on dry fasting, I suggest you go back and listen to that one, because when I dry fast, I plan on stacking that with these patches. The interplay between the FDA and therapeutic peptide regulation, how to bring down the costs of these patches, and how to administer them properly for the strongest effects. We discuss epitalon and epithalamin, and telomere repair, and longevity, and everything you should know before considering using these non-transdermal patches, as they're called. And if you want more on the science of copper peptide and other substances, I suggest you go back to last week's episode, which was episode number 190. Joining us again is Dr. Jon Harmon. He is a highly experienced chiropractic physician with 35 years of experience in supporting both physical and mental health. He is also a board-certified chiropractic extremity practitioner. He's certified in oxidative medicine and board-certified in QEEG and neurofeedback. In this episode, you will also hear about his backstory and what led him to therapeutic peptides and what specifically drew him to these patches. We also discuss some of the celebrity users, the government agencies, the military, the Olympians, politicians, and other folks that rely on these patches. Now, of course, that doesn't guarantee anything, but usually when an invention comes out of a government contract, it has some effect. Now, I've been playing around with these for a couple months. I've also dug into the science, looked through a bunch of the papers, compiled that, as well as shared the details of my experiences with all three products in my outlier review of the LifeWave phototherapy patches. If you're interested in that, everything will be in the show notes for this episode, which you can find at mindbodypeak.com/191. Now, before we dive into the episode, what are you up to this spring? If you're free, come and join me at the Health Optimization Summit in Austin, Texas. It takes place on April 12th through 13th and has one of the best lineups of guest speakers and is sure to be a good time. Personally, my favorite part of this whole industry is going to these events, meeting people and the vendors, trying the products, and just hanging out. And this one is definitely the best value. There'll be 35 major speakers, over 100 cutting-edge biohacking and peak performance brands, 2,000 attendees, 8 movement and breath workshops, 8 workshops, all over the course of 2 days. I want you to come and join me. Go to optimization with an S.com. And if you use the code NICK, N-I-C-K on checkout, that'll save you 10%. Again, this will be in the show notes for this episode, but Health Optimization Summit, April 12th through 13th, and code NICK will save you 10%. See you there. All right, let's dive into part 2 of this episode on copper peptides and LifeWave patches. Dr. Harmon, welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you. We had a good discussion before.
Yes. And for any of you just tuning in, I highly recommend going back to last week's episode where you can find the science, the benefits, the use cases of one particular peptide that's underutilized and pretty unknown still. Dr. Harmon wrote a book called How to Reverse Aging, and it's all about the science of copper peptide. So today we're going to talk about the way to actually use copper peptide, and not just copper peptide, but a novel way of using other beneficial peptides and substances that we're going to dive into you've probably never heard of.
Yeah, this is an exciting time in history. We talked about the nano antennas we have in our skin, and your audience is probably more in tune to the fact that we are frequencies and energy, and there's a way of influencing our body to get it to do and make the right things to remain healthy, stay healthy, get healthy. I'm going to back up to prior to 2004, where the situation existed, or when it existed, that Navy SEALs on long missions in submarines, little submarines, had to stay awake for 100 hours or more on missions. And if you're awake for 100 hours and you get injured, your chances of survival go way down. Plus, they were getting addicted to amphetamines because they had to stay awake. A man named David Schmidt, a real smart scientist, even his grandfather has 100 patents. He has almost 100 now. But he had made a specialized battery for the Navy, and so they knew he was really smart. So they said, David, can you come up with a way of increasing energy production in these Navy SEALs so they don't have to take amphetamines? And this is what he did. He evaluated the frequencies that our bodies emit into our surroundings. What are they? We know there's infrared, far infrared. We see that on night vision goggles, but it also emits visible light. It's just not bright enough to see with our eyes. They can measure it with machinery. And when I said that the first time, my wife was listening, she said, well, if it's bright enough to see with your eyes, why did you say you can't see it? I said, it's not bright enough. Well, so he figured out what are those frequencies.
And those are called biophotons, correct?
Yes. Some people call it bioluminescence, biophotons. And then he posed the question, if I could capture and reuse some of that energy and get it back into the body concentrated in a specific frequency, what could I do with it? Could I turn on a pathway with light? Well, we know vitamin D gets activated with light. Hey, maybe there's something to that. So he started experimenting, and he came up with this. If I can combine some substances in a little patch that forms a new crystal structure that does not exist in nature, it could theoretically refract out or separate our bioluminescence into a single frequency and reflect it back into your body. This is what he did. His first patch was called the Energy Enhancer. And after the Navy went through their testing and used it, then in 2004, with Michael Phelps and our U.S. men's Olympic swim team, they used this energy enhancer to win all those medals. They got accused of doping because the other countries saw these little things sticking on them. They thought they were transdermal. They're not transdermal. So the US and World Doping Agency said they're not doping. And the 2008 Olympics in Beijing, over 300 athletes were using it. Many pro teams are using these for their advantage because it's not doping. And truly, in professional sports, you don't win the 100 meters by a second. You win it by 100th of a second. And so if you can get just a little bit more energy, repair faster, recover from your workouts faster, you can get back in the gym earlier and you can work out longer. So athletes are using these, but truly people all over the world, millions of people all over the world in 90 countries are using these. It's not something that was just invented. The company that makes them is having the 20-year anniversary this year. And over the last 4 years has experienced 2,400% growth. So that'll give you an indication of how well these things work. So this energy enhancer, here's how it does it. It sends a signal into your body that turns on what's called beta oxidation or fat burning in the cell for a sustained amount of energy all day long. Your body will use 300 to 600 calories more in fat burning using the energy enhancer patch. It's not touted as a weight loss, but do the math. If you're burning more fat, hello. Okay, fast forward to 2018. This same scientist figured out how to signal the body to turn back on a declining GHK copper peptide factory. You can actually signal your own body to make more GHK copper peptide that's known in the literature since 1977, have all kinds of benefits that we talked in the previous webinar podcast. Not the least of which is the fact that it turns on the genes that tell your body to make more of your own stem cells. We talked about in the previous hour, why do people travel all over the world to get stem cell infusions? Because it changes the outcome of whatever they have. So in the first time in the history of the world, a doctor, if he's open to it, can hold this thought while making a prognosis. Prognoses are based on the previous progression and history of diseases and disorders. It doesn't mean that's locked in stone. Stem cells have proven that a lot of those faults, because if you can increase your stem cells, you can change the outcome. So for the first time in history, a doctor can say, well, I would say that this person has this much time or this amount of time before that knee gets degenerate, whatever it is, but they're going to be elevating their stem cells every day. This changes the outcome. I'm going to give them a different prognosis. And there are medical doctors and naturopaths and chiropractors and nutritionists and acupuncturists all over the world who have grabbed a hold of this technology to help their patients and their clients get better faster and stay better and get to a higher level of health. So that's the mechanism. You can actually signal your body to make your own. So what does that do for you? The half-life, we talked about the half-life of GHK in your body. I think, Nick, you said it was 8 minutes. Was it that long?
I think it's like up to an hour. It's like between 30 minutes and an hour.
Yeah. So rather than getting an infusion, your body is just making your own all day long. It's not going to make it. It's not going to overmake it, but it basically returns it to the stage when you were in your 20s and making your GHK. What happens after our 20s? Well, we start to get wrinkles and it hurts more to fall. And, things start to, then people start saying, yeah, I'm starting to see the signs of aging. Well, the GHK is known as the reverse aging peptide, GHK copper peptide. So this GHK can mitigate or reverse those effects that happen as we get older. And that's what's so exciting about it, not just for people who want to look better in their skin, but even athletes. But when you click the box, there are 18 chapters in the book I wrote about it. Each chapter is about some different system in our body and how it plays a role in maintaining our health or reversing the signs of aging. as we move along into our fifth and sixth and seventh decade of life.
Dr. Harmon, I want to pause here, take a step back, and understand more about how exactly it's working, because it didn't really click for me until you explained how it works kind of like a diamond in light. Will you fill listeners in on what exactly that analogy is?
All right. You walk into a jewelry store and you walk up to the diamond, the cabinets, and they always have bright white light shining on them because they want them to pop. And they want you to see the refraction that occurs with the different facets of the diamond cut. So you walk up there and the diamonds are mostly clear, but you're seeing orange and green and yellow and blue. And you see all these colors, little, shapes, geometric shapes of these colors. And those are the facets of the diamond cut. What's happening is the diamond property with those cuts, it's separating or refracting out into different wavelengths that are then interpreted by our eyes as colors. It's all in white light, but when you, like a prism, it gets separated out. Your body is the bright white light. The patch has a crystal structure in it. It's the diamond. It singles out a single frequency that is known by the inventor to activate a certain pathway with the patch called the X39. It signals your body to turn on that GHK copper peptide factory. And so there it goes. It turns on the pathway where you make your own rather than getting an infusion or injection or cream from a dermatologist.
Yeah, I found that fascinating because it explains how exactly it works. I'd be really curious to know how the inventor figured out exactly which frequency would do that and then created the crystal structure.
He calls it a download.
A download, okay.
That's exactly what he calls it. He'd been trying to figure out a way for 10 years how to elevate somebody's production of their own stem cells. It was like this, it came into his head, and then he knew, and then he started working on it. And the same is true for his new water machine that's coming out. He figured out how to store light in water, 630 nanometer light in water that you drink, and then you get light therapy through your organs.
I think a lot of inventors throughout history have had something very similar, because we've all heard the stories about people dropping or holding balls and then them dropping and then jolting them out of REM sleep. And it's like how they come up with ideas. And some people do it while literally dreaming. Other inventors just have the downloads and all of a sudden they discover these things. Even in like the Amazon, the probability of them finding the two plants that create, like that you combine, you brew together to create ayahuasca, is like a 1 in a million or a billion chance, some kind of like insanely low probabilistic event, yet it happened. And there's so many instances like that throughout history.
Yeah, he talks about how he lives in Florida and he walks on the beach for 2 hours in meditation. That's like what you just said, so to speak. But he's invented these incredible things that it's technology that didn't exist. And he talks about how his connection with the Stanford swim coach was done through a personal relationship. And because he didn't know how he was going to bring this patch to market. And you can't sit it on the shelf somewhere. It just has FDA clearance for a wellness device. And you have to have somebody who can talk about it and tell about it. And so he set it up in a relationship marketing where friends and relatives can actually tell people about these rather than being sold in Walmart or Walgreens or Amazon. And you can't even say what they do because, the FDA. You can dance around it a lot, but you can't actually say things. That's why we have an international version of what this can do compared to the US version that's printed. It's kind of weird. Maybe that'll change soon.
The uncensored version.
Yeah.
I found the whole story of how he brought these to market interesting what really caught my attention beyond just the testimonials, because I heard a lot of those before I decided to investigate this for myself, was that he was working with the US government and these were not going to be available to the public. And he had a contract, as far as I know, with the US government, and that was going well. And the government, if they're going to spend money on a technology, they want to make sure it's actually doing something. They're not going to fall victim to some scam because they actually put a ton of time, energy, resources into making sure these things work. And if they're repeat customers, something's working.
Right, and that's what happened. They commissioned him to do this, and during the Gulf War, that's when they were used. And then after that was over, it's like the government funding dried up, and so it was his invention. He didn't, give it to the Navy. They just used his product. And then it was, what are other applications of this? Like for sports, the Stanford swim team used them first, and they noticed that everybody got their best times. If you think back to the Olympics, I think like 80% of the swimmers had their personal best at the Olympics. And that's why other people thought they were doping as well. But a lot of things have progressed since then. And now with the patch that elevates the GHK copper peptide, it has the potential of changing the outcome pretty much of anything that somebody has because it elevates your own stem cells. So the incredible testimonials like my own globally in 90 countries right now. It's not a startup company, it's a 20-year-old company. And like tomorrow, I'm doing a live Zoom for an influencer in Finland. I say a couple of sentences and then he's going to translate. So that's going to be fun. But, people all over the world are using these. The studies have been done. There's almost 90 studies. They don't do studies like for diseases and disorders. They do studies. Does wearing this patch elevate the GHK in your blood? Yes, it does. That study was used to show the US Patent Office that the technology works. And that's where David Schmidt got the patent for this technology, was through that blood test that was shown to elevate, just wearing that patch elevates your GHK.
Yeah, I saw that study and I looked into about 15 other research papers, and there were definitely some impressive results about what the X39 copper peptide patch can do, and then also the energy patch, as well as a few others. And it makes sense that you're not going to be able to prove how it influences some disease model because that's getting into the realm of drugs, and this isn't a drug, it's a wellness device.
And you don't want to get under the thumb of the FDA. You just want to help people and not go through the scrutiny of drugs and all those restrictions, because it's not a drug. It's not meant to be a drug. It's meant to, why do people take drugs? Well, my doctor says this thing's not working in my body. The drug is supposed to help me do that. Well, our approach is, let's just help your body do that naturally. And if you think about the simplicity, my goodness, it's using energy you're already making and then reflecting it back into your body, concentrated at a specific frequency, and turning on a pathway with light into a light being and activating this biochemical process rather than some harsh chemical that we're putting into it to try to tweak that always have side effects. All of them do.
Dr. Harmon, I was looking through the research, and when I did, I came across one study on PubMed that was on the energy patch, and it showed no impact on the markers they were looking at. Do you know why that is? Were they looking at the wrong markers, or was the study not set up well?
I don't know what they were looking at. And sometimes it just has to do, what are you measuring? Sometimes people will start out using, for example, the X39. I didn't notice anything for months, but over a period of a year and a half, as documented on 2 stress echocardiograms, the right bundle branch block I had in my art just went poof. And two different doctors said they've never seen one of those go away. So I kind of caution people, how are you going to feel your bones getting stronger? How are you going to feel your cardiovascular system vessels getting strong and flexible? If it's something that you subjectively are noticing, like pain that went away, that's easy. But I always say, my first comment I make when somebody says, "Oh, I'm going to use it for a month and see how I feel," I say, okay, well, let's establish, what are you going to be measuring? Well, I don't know. I'm just going to go by how I feel. Well, if you go into a doctor and you say, I want you to give me a drug, well, what are you feeling? I don't know, but there's got to be something going on, but I don't know what it is. So unless you're measuring something, it's a little bit more difficult knowing that your body is going to be repairing and regenerating over a longer period of time with your own stem cells. I tell people, be patient with your stem cells. You can't tell them where to go. It's going to go to the most life-threatening thing you have first, because those are the signals that your body is sending out, these little chemical messengers. I need help here. Call in the stem cells. And it's inflammation. Stem cells are attracted to inflammation like a moth to a light. Part of the problem with stem cell injections is because if the inflammation is too great, it's like a moth to a flame. The stem cells die. That's why the doctor says, these might not work, but I can't give you a corticosteroid because corticosteroids are anti-regenerative and they will kill the stem cells. So it's a crapshoot when you get a stem cell injection. Whereas if you're elevating them all day long, every day, it's not just one big infusion of billions of stem cells that could die and then you're done.
But I also want to go back to other notable agencies or notable figures that are using this. If you can disclose any, like I know the US government, the Navy was one. Are there any other institutions that were using them?
Kansas City Chiefs last year, they won the Super Bowl. My oldest son is a big Buffalo Bills fan. And when Kansas City was beating and we were watching, I said, you know why Kansas City is winning right now? Because they're using this patch. So that was interesting. Just over the last week, pictures of RFK Jr. with the patch on the back of his neck have been appearing. And not that I'm a big proponent of or fan of Mike Tyson, but he was trying to help his old body. But I think there was a lot more going on with that fight than desire. I think it's, I got to make some more money before I go out. Don't kill me. Professional teams, professional athletes, the strongest man in the world. We have pictures of him with the energy enhancers on that they're worn on the lung point, an inch below the clavicle is important. They're worn on acupuncture points. It's interesting. They've found that the acupuncture meridians, the collagen fibers in those meridians actually conduct electricity a lot better than normal skin. So there are these energy channels and you can influence that. And all of the studies on these patches have been done using important acupuncture points. But the inventor has said you can put them anywhere in the body, but according to him, you get a little bit more of a systemic effect on these energy pathways. There are, without getting into too much detail, because I don't want to leave you confused, but there's a patch for pain. It's not a transdermal patch. It changes heat patterns in the body that cause pain. There was a study done in France in a hospital, and they took patients who were on opioids, and they used the one for pain called LifeWave. 95% of the people, the participants, got more pain relief than they did from the opioids.
Wow.
And it's a simple patch. And I'm telling you, Nick, you can knock pain out in as little as 10 seconds, and people will look at you like you're a magician. It is bizarre that yesterday in my office, one of our patients came limping in. She's an older woman. And I said, God, what'd you do to your knee? She goes, we did some yard work and it's just so painful. I can hardly walk. So I said, pull up your pant leg. She was wearing long pants. And I put the LifeWave patches. It's a combination of two. And then I just said, let me know how that goes. So by the time she left, she had no pain in her knee. And people will ask, well, if I have pain, isn't that a warning sign? Yeah, sometimes. Like if you tore a ligament. But if you have chronic pain, sometimes it's just a memory of a pain. And now the nerves have fired so long, they just keep firing. You can interrupt that pattern. Sorry, that's a little bit of an aside, but same technology for a different outcome rather than elevating a peptide.
No, that's important to know because I think you're right. There is a time and place for pain. Like if you have pain, you don't want to just relieve it and then all of a sudden go out and run a marathon or like really beat your body up.
Right.
But also experiencing pain can hinder your recovery and it can hinder your healing. So if you're able to knock it out or at least knock it down quite a bit so that your body is no longer in the stress of the pain, that can be really helpful to stimulate healing as long as you're not going out and just like beating yourself up after that.
And if you layer that with, my hip hurt so bad from this bursitis, that's not what we were alluding to where you're going to hurt yourself. But what happens now, you're going to form a faulty gait pattern.
Yes.
If you can eliminate the pain while that thing's healing, now you don't have that faulty gait pattern, which leads to obviously other probabilities like wearing my joint out because I'm bearing weight on it incorrectly.
Yeah. Back when I got my wisdom teeth out, I was under the impression that using any kind of chemical assistance was a bad idea. So I just didn't, after the anesthetic wore off, I didn't use any of the painkillers they gave me. And going back, if I was to do it over again, I would probably take a different approach, possibly a better, less side effect prone approach. But also when I recently hurt my back, it was my first real injury in a very long time. The LifeWave patch would have been super helpful. I recovered really quickly. I was using the copper peptide patch, the X39, but I think that the combination of that with the pain relief would have been really helpful because if it's interfering with your ability to sleep and to recover, you're going to really prolong the healing.
Yeah. And I've had, I was a pretty, let's say, aggressive skier. And I broke my leg, tore my cartilage back in 1973, just out of high school. And that started the whole process of degeneration. And after the surgery, I didn't use any opioids. I didn't use any pain pills. I just used LifeWave and the one called Eon that drastically reduces inflammation. So, we've introduced some other names here. The flagship product is the X39 that elevates GHK and thereby elevating your own stem cells. But there are other supportive patches that do very important things. And people ask me, which ones do you use? All of them. Why wouldn't I? They do different things.
Yeah.
Like the glutathione. You can, nutrition companies, liposomal encapsulated glutathione, they brag if they get a 10% increase in your glutathione level. The glutathione level has been proven through blood tests to elevate your glutathione level 300% within 24 hours. That's more like an IV. And it's not the short half-life of glutathione. It's all day long you've elevated it. So that's a little bit of diversion. Sorry about that. But to know that you have the system to help your body be the best that you can be, it totally changes the emphasis rather than, trying to fix the body after something happens, just keep it healthy.
So that was one of the things that I looked into when I was comparing this versus the actual substance itself, the physical substance.
Yeah.
For example, I looked up the cost of getting copper peptide at my usual supplier as an injection, and I calculated the dose cost, and it seemed like it was much more cost efficient to go the injection route. But I totally forgot about the fact that the half-life of the injection is only 1 hour or less. Plus, then you have the hassle of actually having to do the injection, the discomfort of the copper peptide injection.
Right.
And like the complications with travel and all that stuff.
Yeah. And a lot of people can't give themselves an injection. Like sometimes a doc will give you a vial and some syringes, but a lot of people can't do that themselves.
Yeah, well, you also have to reconstitute it yourself and make sure you get the dosing right and you don't make a big mistake with that. Because with some peptides, the dosing matters tremendously. Like the GLP-1 drugs, if you get that wrong, it can send you to the hospital. I've heard horror stories of people accidentally taking 10x the dose and winding up in the hospital.
And this is one of the reasons the FDA is clamping down on those injectable and infusible peptides. Yeah, I met a gal. She and her husband run a training company called MedMasters, and they train doctors on how to do all of these cutting edge alternative treatments. And she was giving herself GHK injections, and just the fact that she didn't have to do that anymore made her really happy. Now she just uses the patch rather than giving herself an injection.
Yeah, it makes sense. I didn't even tell you this, but last night or yesterday, I used the energy patch for the first time, and I didn't expect to notice much, but about an hour after I put it on, I was doing my usual meditation while inhaling Brown's gas in front of red light therapy, actually neurofeedback technically, and I noticed I felt a lot more stimulated, but like in a pleasant, easy to control, not like I just drank a bunch of caffeine
Yeah, it's
or
not like that at all.
drugs or anything. No, it was pleasant, like alert. But then that was nice and it lasted and it was pretty unwavering throughout the entire day. Last night, I usually get very tired at the same time every night. I couldn't figure it out. And then I was laying in bed, tossing and turning. I'm asleep usually within 5 minutes of hitting the bed. So pretty quickly, it must have been 45 minutes last night. And I'm like, wow, I just feel totally energized. Like I could go out and exercise right now. And I couldn't figure it out for the life of me. And then I looked down and I realized I was still wearing the two patches. I took them off and within 5 minutes I fell asleep.
Yeah,
and I was like, well, I didn't even know I was wearing these. So there wasn't a placebo effect because like I totally forgot about it.
Right.
And I was like replaying, when did I have caffeine last? When did I exercise? Did I eat too close to bed? None of those. And then I looked down like, oh, I totally forgot. Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting. People will ask me, well, what do you feel like? And I say, you know what? It's not like a stimulant, but I call it the lack of fatigue. I just don't feel tired. You know how people get tired in the afternoon. It's just like a sustained amount of energy. I got mine on right now, and it just helps me be myself and not get those drops in energy, because I never feel hyped up on them. But I don't recommend wearing them at night. So there are a couple of patches that you want to wear, the energy enhancers during the day, and then there's one that you use at night called the Alavita. It actually signals the pineal gland to make and release more melatonin, but also epithalamin. It's known as the repairer of telomeres because it signals your body to make more telomerase, which repairs the endings of our genes. That's why it's called the fountain of youth peptide. So we have access to that as well. And if you put that in context, those two peptides, GHK copper peptide during the day, epithalamin at night, you got a lot of things, a lot of good things that are happening in your body, just if you only use those two to help your body be the best they could be.
Yeah. Tell me more about epithalamin and epitalon, because that's like the synthetic form that's usually used as an injection. And I know it's really hot as the fountain of youth peptide, the longevity peptide. It's got lots of uses. One of the things that I think is most fascinating about it is melatonin is now being called the body's master antioxidant. Glutathione is being pushed aside, and it's now melatonin because a lot of it exists in cells outside of the brain in your gut, and it has a really protective effect on the mitochondria and throughout the body. But supplementation also has its issues. Like high dose supplementation makes sense for certain people, especially if you have chronic conditions. Check with your doctor, of course. But the issue with that is when you supplement in high dose, either you're taking it liposomally, so you're getting a consistent dose throughout the night, or you're taking a normal powder or pill and you get a huge spike followed by a crash. And when you use this peptide, it stimulates your pineal gland to have more powerful melatonin secretions. So you're actually like enhancing the body's natural process of producing melatonin. in a more bioharmonious way, the way your body's naturally supposed to do it. It's just bringing that system online and making it more effective.
That's exactly right. You explained that really well, where if you take something, you're getting this rush of that, whatever substance it is. Whereas if you're just doing it the natural way, activating your own pineal gland to make something, it's not going to overproduce a naturally occurring thing. It's basically returning it to the way it used to be. Um, we had some pretty severe things happen in my family that shifted me onto this course of the brain, trying to help my daughters and my granddaughters recover from the effects of their cousin committing suicide. And then my daughter's husband was murdered, and they had anxiety, depression, insomnia. I had anxiety induced insomnia. And to be able to now sleep through the night and not have any of that is a huge thing for me. I used to wake up, my heart would be pounding and think I was going to die in the middle of the night. But this epithalamin, let's talk about that. Epitalon is the 4 amino acids that make up the natural form called epithalamin. Epithalamin. The name on the book that I used is a synthetic form because that's what the research was done using that peptide. You can't harvest enough epithalamin from pineal glands to do research, so they synthesized it. Dr. Kavinzin in Russia did a lot of it. In that book, there are 96 references to the research. There was a long-term human study done showing that the humans in this study lived 8 to 12 years longer using epithalamin, but it activates the pineal gland to release more epithalamin, which signals the release of telomerase. It's telomerase that repairs the endings of our genes called the telomeres. For those of you who are not familiar with that term, think the plastic cap on the end of your shoelace holding the threads together, but it's at the end of our genes. There's kind of conveniently a throwaway part that loses a little length every time a cell divides. The length of your life, or the number of times you can divide, is dependent upon the length of your telomeres. You can go to a lab and have your telomeres measured. And there are people in LifeWave who've actually done that prior to using the patch. They'll go have their telomeres measured and then do it later and show their biological age as opposed to their chronological age. And they're huge shifts. So here's what happens. If you can repair your telomeres with telomerase, your cells can divide up to 30% more times before that cell either becomes senescent, turns into a zombie cell, or dies. And so that patch as well is known in the literature, epitalon is known to have a huge benefit because it helps restore the circadian rhythm by restoring sleep cycles, and has a huge effect on the skin as well as the GHK. So between the two of them, you got a lot of really, really good stuff going with that. One of the other benefits, of course, melatonin, that helps restore the sleep, then your circadian rhythm. If your circadian rhythm gets restored, then what? Now you start to get hormonal balance because it's restored during the proper sleep cycles when your circadian rhythm is stored. And we talked about that a little bit. So those are some of the really big things regarding epithalamin or epitalon. They call it the fountain of youth peptide. That is increased in our body when we use the patch called the Alavida, Alavida, Alavida. This is a lot of information. Just the X39 is enough for most. So if you do want more information, that book on Amazon is called The Reverse Aging Power of Epitalon. That's Epitalon. Whereas the first one about GHK is called How to Reverse Aging, A Comprehensive Guide to Copper Peptides. The people who like to dig into the research. Epitalon has huge benefits for the brain as well. Lots of other benefits, 96 references to the research. Longevity, length of life, quality of life, huge benefits.
Yeah. I think also that the pineal peptides and their derivatives also can help decalcify the pineal gland, and they can also help with fatigue and memory and mental performance and resilience against stress. I'd imagine they help the pineal produce not just melatonin more effectively, but a lot of the other metabolites that the work of Dr. Joe Dispenza has shown the brain can produce when it's given the right raw materials and isn't calcified. And I guess you can just boost it with the right peptides.
Yes. And that the study that was done with this Alavida showed how it beneficially influenced the frontal lobes, the pineal gland, the hypothalamus. So you think about the connection there to hormones, influence in the pituitary gland. You're affecting the HPA axis, adrenal, the HPT axis, thyroid, all of that that originates in the pituitary gland. So also frontal lobes, I mean, that's our executive suite. That's attention, that's decision making, it's motivation, executive function, decision making. Those all come from the frontal lobes, and they showed how it lit up, actively beneficially affected those things.
So I'm going to guess, based on the research I've seen around epitalon, that a lot of people use it several times, several cycles per year. Like you do the one, you do maintenance a couple times per year. I'm going to guess with the patch, you could, if it's out of budget, just use it a couple times for cycles throughout the year. I forget the exact duration. I think it's like 10 days, 20 days. And you do that like 4 times a year. And that way it's more affordable. And it's also, you're getting the benefits of elevating that peptide and helping the pineal gland.
Yeah. And even David Schmidt says you don't need to use some of them every day. Like the glutathione, it raises it 300%. It is not really something that you would need to use every day. But, you think in times of stress and exposure to viruses and things like that, man, patch up, protect your body, activate your immune function by doing so when needed.
Yeah. You also mentioned that some people have measured their telomere length before and after using it. I'd love to see other biological age quantification, such as like glycation, or my personal favorite, epigenetic methylation. Those tests, especially the good clocks, are really powerful and give you a ton of insight. And I bet these would make a huge difference. In fact, I'm probably going to test that at some point and share my results of trying to hold everything else in my lifestyle constant and then just using a cycle of epitalon or the patch and the X39 copper peptide at the same time.
Why doesn't that surprise me?
I also think these patches would combine really nicely with something like dry fasting, which can also already help with demethylation or restoring cells to a more youthful state, because it activates autophagy much more profoundly than water fasting and other forms of fasting. There's a great book on this called The Phoenix Protocol by Dr. August Dunning, where he outlines exactly how it works and the metabolic changes that occur as soon as you introduce even a drop of water into the mouth. And I could just see this would be the perfect 1-2 combo just to like really amplify the benefits.
Wow, you need to do that and measure it.
Yep. Oh, I will.
I'm so busy with the practice and also with LifeWave and doing podcasts and book signings and things that I really didn't have time to do that. I'd love to see that.
Yeah. Tell me about your own story. I don't think we mentioned it on this podcast yet, but how you got so involved with these and why.
So I started using the X39 in April of 2020, like right when the big quarantine things happened. And At that time, I did not know I had a right bundle branch block in my heart. I knew I had um, heart palpitation, preventricular contractions, what they were. And I noticed those. I was a long distance runner. They don't affect you when you're exercising, but at rest, your heart will just kind of skip a beat. And it was annoying, but didn't really affect me much. And I talked about the knee replacement. My knee replacement was already scheduled for August of 2020. And I'd been using the patch for about 4.5 months. And all of a sudden, those PVCs got strangely rhythmic every fifth beat, day and night, day and night. And I'm starting to get worried. I got this knee replacement coming up. Something's going on with my heart. I went to the cardiologist and we did a stress echo. That's when it showed up. And he came in after the test and he said, yeah, you just have these PVCs and a right bundle branch block. And I said, well, what caused that? And he said, well, in our entire body, our body kills off 50 to 70 billion cells a day because they're old and it's supposed to replace them. You just can't replace them fast enough because the heart's beating all the time. And the light went on. I have no proof of this, but this was my thought. I've been elevating my stem cell production every day for 4.5 months. Maybe they're getting replaced and they don't know how to do it yet. And they're all misfiring at the same time. This was my theory. And 2 weeks later, PVCs were gone. A year and a half later, I had another stress echo done, right bundle branch block no longer present. That's when I started to wonder, how in the heck did this happen? That's when I started doing all the research, which led to writing the book. Because when you're digging through research papers, it's not very fun. And I thought everybody should really have this information because it's so powerful and it's so simple. So I had this download. I thought, okay, somebody has to tell the story. How do you get these peptides? You can get them in an infusion, an injection, a cream, or you can wear this innovative phototherapy patch. I did not mention the name of the product or the company. I didn't want it to be an advertisement, but I wanted to get this message out because people who don't have thousands and thousands of extra dollars to go fly somewhere to get stem cell injections or infusions can wear this patch for $3.33 a day. And they need to understand how powerful it is to determine any potential benefit of wearing the patch. All you have to do is turn to the literature that's been known since 1977 about what the GHK copper peptide does. The study that was done wearing the patch showed that it elevates GHK. So there's the connection. So that over the period of a year after that, I decided to write a book about the second most powerful patch that elevates epitalon. And so your listeners could actually request. I did a webinar about the top things that cause us to age faster and die younger, and how the GHK and or epitalon can mitigate or reverse those things. They could request a link and we could send it to them, or you could send it out with, put it in the chat or whatever when people are, so they could see it when they watch this.
Yeah, I'll put it in the show notes for sure.
Okay.
And on your list of the things that kill people the fastest, you were missing one that I have to point out, and that is iatrogenesis, or medical deaths.
Yes, medical death. That's one of the highest. Unfortunately, people don't want to hear that. They're so blind and deaf to that. You say that and they say, no, that can't be true. But man, I've told people for years, if your doctor doesn't talk to you about nutrition and lifestyle changes, get another doctor.
Yeah, but the issue with that is so few doctors talk about nutrition and lifestyle changes. I agree with you. And at the same time, it's incredibly difficult to find.
I know. It really is. We could go down a rabbit hole with that, but this is an interesting time. And I think there are really big changes coming up in our food and what, medicines, getting looked into, where big pharma and the FDA have kind of taken care of each other a little bit, and hopefully that's going to come to an end. I say that very tactfully.
Well, hopefully the population's best interests are kept in mind throughout.
Yes, and I never understood that until I understood the money part.
Yeah, and the revolving door.
Yeah.
But that's a whole nother rabbit hole we could talk about for literally hours.
Bless their little hearts.
Yeah. Back on this subject, are there any things people should know before getting started?
Yes. When a person doesn't have very many stem cells left because we're older, or from something that's happened to you with illnesses and things, one has to keep in mind that when you all of a sudden have a big increase in your stem cells, your body makes decisions. I can kill all those zombie senescent cells if you have normal detox pathways and you have a clear drainage funnel being the bowel, kidneys, gallbladder, liver, lymphatic, and skin. If you have any hiccups in those, you may get a little bit of backup because you have all of this recycling that has to occur with these cells that have been killed off. Drink lots of water. If your body does it too fast in order to be able to keep up with it, you can dose yourself, so to speak, by doing this. The non-adhesive side of the patch is the exact same substance. It just doesn't have its adhesive on the outside of the patch. You can wear it on an article of clothing, like a sweater. So put it on the neck of the sweater area. Put the sweater on for a couple of hours. Take it off for a couple of hours. Let your body catch up with all of the detox it needs to do. If your detox pathways are problematic, most people don't notice anything. They just drink more water. It gives your body all the resources to clear things out. You don't notice it. In the event that you do feel a little sluggish, it's not harmful. There aren't side effects to the patch. There's just, can my body keep up with what is happening inside of me now? Because it hasn't happened for a long time. And now you're getting an influx of new stem cells that can replace the old ones and get rid of the old ones. The other thing, you want to have a good source of copper. We talked about that.
The reason that works is because your biophotons extend beyond just the immediate surface of your skin, and the patch, even though it's not touching your skin because it's on an article of clothing, is still able to reflect those specific frequencies back into the body.
As long as it's within 3 inches.
3 inches, okay.
Yeah, we've even put we'd be at a health fair and somebody had come up, and this guy was actually a cosmetic surgeon, and he had shoulder pain. They just put the patch on the outside of his clothing, and he was hardly able to concentrate. It was at a conference. Within 10 minutes, he had no pain. That really got his attention. And, plastic surgeons are dependent upon things looking really good out here. And if you can make it, the GHK helps resolve scar tissue and helps repair collagen. So these people have surgery and they look like you can't even tell where the scars were. They get lots more referrals. So it's really getting attention in that circle. I forgot to mention in the cardiovascular circle, cardiologists, there've been 2 peer-reviewed papers that cardiologist has written. He's presenting them at a cardiologist CE course convention soon, using one of the other patches called carnosine. They actually increased ventricular ejection fraction just using the patch.
Interesting.
I know. That's another topic. But things that you want to have ample supply of copper. You want to make sure you have an ample protein intake, because that gets broken down into the amino acids that you need to make the peptide.
That's good to know. And that reminds me also, I know the benefits are systemic, but is there an advantage to putting the patch over a troubling area? Like, for example, when I had my back injury, I put the patch on my lower back where the injury was instead of just where it usually goes. And also you mentioned that man put the pain patch or the patch on his shoulder that was in pain. So is there extra benefit to putting it locally?
Yes, and I've actually recommended that for several years. Put it right where the really critical issue is. One of my grandsons had a lawn mowing business, and there was a mishap, um, and he got 3 of his fingertips sliced, and parts of them didn't make it. But I patched him after the surgery. I put the patches right over the bandages. He went in for his week checkup, and the doctor says, "Wow, these are looking really good. You can go back to working out. Just don't bump your fingers." And so my grandson's just like blown away. The first text I got was T got 3 of his fingers cut off, and I'm going, "This guy's a varsity basketball player at the high school here," and I was just sick. And I got to the hospital. It was the tips. But man, they did a good job of putting it back together. So issues like that, put it right there, right where you
Okay.
got it,
Okay.
right where you have the issue. You put it on the body, it goes systemically, but right underneath the skin is where you can do more. Now, the inventor has said wearing a second patch, it's not a double. It's not a linear relationship. You wear 2 patches, you get double. You get about a 20% bump in the peptide that it's designated to elevate or designed to
Okay.
elevate. So that cardiologist actually put 6 carnosine patches around somebody's heart, and they were looking at through the sonogram, the ultrasound. They were looking at the contraction of the ventricle. They showed it just coming in like that, and with the patches on, it was actually getting more blood flow through the heart. So this is, you know, when you first start with something like this, you can't make claims about that. But then things like cardiologists and orthopedic surgeons, they're using them for the benefit of their patients. They're decreasing the healing time. So they're healing faster, they're getting less scar tissue, they're more functional, they have better outcomes. And so they start reporting those things. And it's been a really, great time because the stem cell activation patch, the X39, has been around since 2018 now. So, 6 years of experience with fingertips that are cut off, that are sewn back on. It first dies, you get the black of necrosis, and then the GHK rapidly infiltrates that damaged tissue, and fingertips are saved, and other things like that. So with this 6-year history of that now, we have lots of testimonials and validation from the medical community.
That reminds me, I also wanted to ask you about the stem cell benefits because when I was reading the Phoenix Protocol, Dr. August Dunning was talking about how stem cell exhaustion can be a problem
Yes.
if you do a certain duration of dry fast too frequently. So he recommends sticking to the short duration more often than every once in a while having a longer dry fast. And then also the issue of stem cell senescence, kind of like a normal cell can become senescent if you don't ever actually activate your endogenous stem cells to a significant degree more than everyday life, then you can have senescence there and have issues when you actually need them for repair. But are you seeing that this is not going to deplete stem cells in a deleterious way? Is it going to actually like upregulate the production in the bone marrow or something totally different?
Yeah, that it's interesting you bring that up because I did talk about that in the book, stem cell senescence. So when I started using these, I was 66. A lot of my stem cells were senescent. This activates your production of new pluripotent stem cells. Pluripotent means they can become any cell. I call them cells that haven't decided what they want to be when they grow up. And so they come out, they're made, they come out, Nick needs some liver cells today. Okay, all you guys over here, you guys be liver cells, you be bone cells. Um, so you have the potential and the ability to repair or regenerate whatever is needed in the body. We tell people it's going to go to your most pressing needs first, usually the things that could kill you faster, cardiovascular, um, We don't know for sure, but it just makes sense because people have had, if they're not measuring things, you don't know if you can't feel it. So, what was the second part of your question?
Yeah, I was just curious if these are going to exhaust stem cell reserves, or if it's not going to have that effect. It's just going to.
No, part of the reason we lose that is because the gene that codes to have your body make more stem cells gets activated where it's inactive, and you're not making very many stem cells anymore. So that gets activated. You start making more new stem cells for regeneration and repair to help counteract what's going on, where a lot of them have become senescent.
Okay. And then also, are you seeing or hearing good results from people stacking this with other things? Back to the stacking question, things like either DMSO. I'm not sure if that would have an effect because it's not actually, there's no active substance in the patch. Like if you were going to use like a nicotine patch or something, any other kind of patch, DMSO would drive it deeper and help it pass through, would help it pass through the skin, and you'd absorb and assimilate more of whatever it was. And you can use that with peptides, nootropics, a lot of things. But I'm not sure if that would have any impact on this. But I'm also curious about things like PEMF or other therapies to enhance the effects, aside from red light. We already talked about red light quite a bit.
There is some mention in the literature of how increasing your GHK enhances all of those natural therapies. PEMF, red light, sauna, those are all enhanced. And truly, some metabolic pathways can't work as well if you don't have GHK, like making red blood cells. It helps with the movement of copper and donating copper where it's needed, making neurons, making BDNF in the brain, neurotransmitters. That's all part of this. So to your point, your question about DMSO, I haven't seen anything specifically about DMSO. I know there are people, of course, there are people that use all kinds of different therapies because they have access to it, or they've done them, but I don't have any hard data on that for you.
Okay, yeah, I figured. I don't think it would work. I don't think the mechanism would make sense here for that.
We used to do DMSO infusions in the clinic, and I always used to say, it smells like SpaghettiOs. Next time you're around someone who's had a DMSO infusion, you're going to smell that and you go, oh, Harmon said, smells like SpaghettiOs.
Yes, exactly. Well, if people want to pick up some patches, it sounds like the X39 is going to be the starting place for most people that want the best overall effects. Definitely. If they want energy specifically, the energy patch. If they want more of the longevity anti-aging, perhaps the X39 still, and then the Olivita for the pineal.
Yeah. And melatonin, yes.
And melatonin, yeah.
If finances are an issue, X39, always. Start with X39. And the other things are also beneficial. If someone were to say, I can only do one, do the X39. And then they can get a hold of me. You're going to have the link to the webinar that I did. There's information on that webinar where they can also, there's a QR code, they can scan it, that will go to my office, and then we'll send you a signed book. It's the same cost that is on Amazon that's not signed. If they want to do that, and then we can also show them their best options if they want to get some of these patches in their hands and start using them.
Yeah, and I'll put links to everything we've discussed so far in the show notes. And if you send me any research that you think is worth including, Dr. Harmon, I will put that there as well.
Awesome.
Yeah, and I'm looking forward to seeing how this space continues to evolve and the new patches and things that come out, because I've heard way too many reports and anecdotes from people getting incredible results from just a single patch. Yeah. I haven't had that experience where just, I guess the energy patch, but like from the X39, I didn't apply one patch and just have my life completely changed, but it happens. And if it's out there and some people are having that exact experience,
Yes.
it's my duty to share that with the world.
And Nick, I wanted to say one more thing too. There are two patches that I use in my practice to show people how fast these work. One of them is I'll have them stand sideways to me and they'll hold their arms as stiff as they can. And then I'll get next to them and I'll try to lift up on their arm. I say, stabilize your core. And they almost turn over when I do that. Then I'll put the energy enhancers just in their hand. I don't even stick them onto it. Hold the tan one in your left and the white one in your right. And then we wait about 15 seconds and have them perform that again. And they're totally stable. They got all this energy in their core to stabilize themselves. That's one. The other one is the X49. We didn't even talk about that. That elevates the AHK copper peptide, but that peptide forms because of the way the copper is contained in the peptide. It forms this little Faraday cage inside of you, and it protects you from EMFs, 5G, 4G, all those things. So this is how I show people. I'll find a strong muscle, lock in strong. Then I'll have them hold their phone up to their chest, and my staff will call their phone and test that muscle. Then they have no strength. That's how bad those EMFs affect a person. And then we'll put the X49 on them, wait 10 seconds, do it again. The ringing of that phone has zero effect on their muscle strength. A lot of times I'll actually use muscles of gait. I'll have them raise their right arm and left leg, and I'll push down, rock solid. With the phone up against their chest, they can't even hold their arm up. They can push it down with one finger. With the X49 on, rock solid again. So I do that to show people how quickly the patch can work. But then I say the X39 is not for immediate effect. It's for long-term regeneration. So be careful, or be patient with your stem cells.
Yeah. And that's what another takeaway I've gotten is that you want to give it at least a couple months of opportunity to work and to show the results, and take the before after photos so you can track your progress.
Right.
A lot of these changes won't be apparent.
And we tell people
overnight.
Consider using it for 1 month for every decade of your life. So if you're 30, use it at least 3 months. I was 64, use them 7 months.
Gotcha. I'd be curious to see, you were talking about how you used kinesio testing to see the impact on people. I'd be curious to see if you guys have tried calibrating with David Hawkins' scale to see what the patches calibrate at.
I'll bet there's somebody who's done that. And I can put a note out on the Facebook page and see if I get any hits on that.
Perfect. Well, Dr. Harmon, if people have made it this far, any parting words of wisdom you want to leave them with?
New technology hasn't existed before. Preconceived ideas about previous progression of disorders or diseases, although we don't treat disorders or diseases, we just help your body take care of business on its own. Don't go into it with preconceived doubts about the help that you can receive. Just like why people travel all over the world and get stem cell injections, it potentially changes the outcome of anything. That would be my message to give people hope.
More than potentially, it absolutely does change the outcome. And that's like a factor that we see in research often, like the placebo and the nocebo effect can have magnitudes of effect that are bigger than the actual intervention itself. Mm-hmm. So if you go in with a negative belief that this cannot possibly work because it doesn't deliver anything transdermally through the skin like a substance, then yeah, perhaps it won't work as well or won't work at all. But if you go in with like at least an open mind, then you can actually experience what so many other people have reported experiencing. And you've experienced.
What we think about, we bring about. Well, this has been great, Nick. It's been fun. I enjoy talking to someone who's done as much research as you have. I can say big words and not worry.
Thank you. I hope we did a good job of defining everything in this episode and the last one. So if you guys have any questions about the science or more of the benefits, you can go back to last week's episode again, and you will get all the information you need right there. These two interviews perfectly complement each other. So Dr. Harmon, thanks again for joining me on the podcast.
Hey, it's been great, Nick. Thank you for sharing all this 2 hours with me today. It's great.
I hope that this has been helpful for you. If you enjoyed it, subscribe and hit the thumbs up. I love knowing who's in the 1% committed to reaching their full potential. Comment 1% below so that I know who you are. For all the resources and links, meet me on my website at mindbodypeak.com. I appreciate you and look forward to connecting with you. As a reminder, the information depicted in this video is for information purposes only. Please consult your primary healthcare professional before making any lifestyle changes.